Hello, this is Joe Trahan, welcoming you to the All Me podcast from the Taylor Hooton Foundation, whose mission is to enlighten the world to the truths about appearance and performance-enhancing substances. As the national leader on this subject, they communicate their educational messages through various methods, including this podcast. Thank you for listening and enjoy the show.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the All Me podcast. This is Don Hooton Jr., and today I'll be your host. Today we're back with interview number 5 in our 6-part series with our partners, the Professional Baseball Strength and Conditioning Coaches Society, or PBSCCS. We've been excited about this series as we've had the opportunity to interview the best strength coaches and performance coaches in Major League Baseball to bring their knowledge right into the comfort of your home or vehicle. Today, we're going to be talking with Joe Hudson, minor league performance coach for the Boston Redsox. The topic that we're going to be covering is going to be lower body strength training. Everybody has heard the term never skip leg day, and Joe is going to walk us through why training the lower body a few times throughout the week can help us in our everyday lives, as well as how it impacts professional athletes. As you will quickly learn, there is not a one-size-fits-all workout program or routine when it comes to lower body strength training. I know that this podcast will certainly provide you a perspective that you didn't have before. I want to make sure that we say thanks again to the PBSCCS for all of their years of support of our All Me League and for providing the strength coaches for this unique series here on the All Me podcast. A big thank you to our partners at Gatorade for sponsoring this podcast episode and helping bring this important information to thousands of listeners around the world. Should we or shouldn't we skip leg day? Well, let's talk with Red Sox performance coach Joe Hudson to find out. Good morning, Joe. How are you today? Thank you for joining the podcast.
Good, Don. How you doing? Thanks for having me.
Oh, this has been such a great series with all the Professional Baseball Strength and Conditioning Coaches Society members that we've had a chance to interview over the past couple weeks. And it's great to be able to focus on the physical side of things and work with guys like you who are experts in this industry and obviously training some of the world's best athletes. So one of the things I would like to start by doing is kind of get to know a little bit more about you and your background. So why don't we start by talking about little Joe and sort of where you grew up and what were your interests early on and really what led you to the interest of strength conditioning?
Yeah, so my name's Joe Hudson. I'm originally from Greenfield, Massachusetts, a smaller town in western Massachusetts, just a little south of the Vermont border. Growing up, I played lots of different sports, football, basketball, baseball, a little bit of soccer, like to play street hockey, all that stuff growing up as a kid. And, really baseball became like my sport passion. And, I really excelled at that at a young age. And through high school, went on and I played in college. And, I really started to find a passion for my field, strength and conditioning, like as I was trying to be a better athlete myself. So it really came, it stemmed from that to begin with. I took athletics really seriously and, I wanted to be better. And, I always kind of excelled at baseball from an early age, but not really at other sports as much. Like I played them, but I wasn't very good. And being competitive, like I did not like it. So I constantly practiced and tried to find ways to gain an advantage. And that was really through like strength and conditioning early on. I used to grab some manuals, like start to look online and, anything that I could get my hands on to help make myself a better athlete. And I did end up being overall pretty decent at other sports. I still excelled at baseball, but I'd really started to kind of see the fruits of my labor. And, it really interested me. And I started making a little weight room in my parents' basement. I would tape like a ladder on the floor with duct tape, and I would cut a soccer ball open that I found at the playground and fill it with sand and make a med ball. And, got really creative with that stuff. And, then I started to kind of like spread it out, to some of my teammates who were interested in developing their athletic careers as well. And where it really started to flourish was, in college. I have a brother who's 6 years younger than me, and he's kind of followed in my footsteps. Well, I'll say early on a little bit. He still follows in my footsteps a little bit. And, he's a strength coach in professional baseball as well now. But, he was getting into the age where he saw me competing in college, and he was a good athlete. Second children most of the time are the better of the athletes for whatever reason, but he was starting to get interested. So I started training him a little bit more. And then I started to see how he was getting better. And, I kind of took some of the mistakes I learned from myself early on, and I made some adjustments and applied them to him. And he ended up having a very good baseball career as well, getting a scholarship to a pretty good baseball school. And that was really the early days of me and my strength and conditioning, and kind of how I became passionate about it.
Good for you. I think back to, I was sort of the same way. I played a lot of sports growing up, right? We all played soccer, played t-ball, I played basketball, I played ice hockey because I grew up in the Northeast, did a lot of roller hockey with my friends and kind of pick up football in the street and all that fun stuff. Like you, I too started to develop in baseball, but I go back in my mind and I wish at that time when I was in middle school, even high school, I had more knowledge about strength and conditioning, because oftentimes on our podcast for, the past 80 or 90 episodes or so, we've talked a lot about nutrition, which is super important. And we've talked a lot about, dietary supplements and obviously the perils of anabolic steroids. But this has been a great series to learn about strength, because it is a super key to performance, especially if it's something you can master or at least get a grasp of at an early age. And I know today we're going to be talking specifically about lower body strength, but for somebody that's listening, now you said both you and your brother played college sports, and then, you both now have a career in professional baseball. For somebody that would want to go down that career path too, what would you recommend to them in order to gain enough knowledge, if you will, to have an opportunity to work in professional sports?
Yeah, I think it starts honestly with like experimenting on yourself, at a younger age, see what things work, see what things don't work. There's so many different things out there on how to train, what's the best way to train. With the way social media is, like, you could pretty much find a way to, how should I say it? Like, you can see anything on training, right? Whether it's good, bad, or otherwise. So you have to be able to separate the good from the bad. And I think early on as strength coaches, like, we all kind of use ourselves as our first clients and our guinea pigs. And a lot of times that trickles, like for me, down to my brother being a guinea pig as well. And then you kind of see what works and what doesn't work and make adjustments. But, it's really just, I think, just getting some basic experience, understanding like the foundational principles of strength and conditioning, regular progressive overload, and seeing what things work for certain people, why they work and why some things don't work. And then it's really just finding a mentor, I would say. Finding somebody that you can at least look to ask questions and have somebody to bounce ideas off of, and they might be able to steer you down the right path a little bit more, let you still make mistakes, but keep you from making big ones, and just help you grow.
Yeah, and that definitely translates to any industry, because if you have a mentor and somebody, like you said, you can go to and ask questions from, you can obviously learn from that person's mistakes, because we all make them, and that's how we learn and get better. But I have to ask you, so you're growing up in Massachusetts. Are you a Red Sox fan, a Yankees fan, a Mets fan? I know you have a lot of great teams up there in the Northeast, but who was your team you went for in baseball growing up?
Yeah, Red Sox.
Okay.
Red Sox. Yep.
So it's pretty cool. Well, now, your career path has led you to the minor league performance coach for the Red Sox. So tell us kind of, what does your day-to-day look like? Now, I know it's vastly different, whether it's spring training, off days during the season, and even, game days. If you could kind of walk us through what a day in the life looks like as a minor league performance coach for the Red Sox.
Yeah. So, we just got home from a 2-week road trip out to Erie, Pennsylvania, and Akron, Ohio. So, when it was all said and done, we had a 2:00 game on Sunday, and we left after the game around 5:30 and got back about 7 a.m. on Monday morning. Outside of that, now we're home again. So standard day, I usually get to the park anywhere between like 8 and 9 o'clock. I'm more of a morning person. I like to get here early. My family's at home right now, so I can afford to like spend a little bit more time at the park. That usually shifts when they come to visit or things like that. I'll go in a little bit later, but typically I'm here between 8 and 9. I get a good lift in for like an hour and a half, shower, get some breakfast, and then really start the day by like 11. Try and start the day by 11, get prepared for the day by just making sure everybody's programs are ready, set up for them. The weight room's kind of set up for what the flow of the day is going to be like, and really put together our daily schedule. So, we are very focused on managing our players' workloads. We use a device called Catapult. Measures, it's a GPS device, measures their yardage and their speeds, their velocities they're running at. So we utilize that to manage guys' workloads, just to see, when they've had a high day, when they've had a low day, how we need to balance them out so that they're keeping pretty consistent throughout a week, throughout a month, and throughout the year. So I spend a good amount of time looking at that in the mornings, making plans for guys. If a guy was low, I might have to get him a little bit of extra running yards. If a guy was really high, I might have to give him more of a recovery focused day. So it's really just planning out the day. And usually by noon, we're having a little staff meeting with our strength coaches and our medical staff, just to go over anything that might have popped up within the last day, and a plan of attack on how to do that. And really, from there, it's like 12:30 to 2:30. Guys come up into the weight room. We're getting them prep for the day, having conversations on how guys are feeling. We go out for stretches between like 2 and 3. We'll have a pitcher stretch, a position player stretch, any sort of running conditioning that they have for the day. And then they'll go into BP around 3:30. And then from there, we go back to the weight room, spend a little bit more time with usually our pitchers at that point in the day. And then by 5 o'clock, we're getting a quick snack, changing for the game, and heading out for the game. And then whenever the game's done, usually these days they're like 2.5 hours or so, we will come in, collect their catapults, start to cut that data, look at it, and then just start to prep for the next day, really. So it's a 12-hour day. Yeah, 10 to 12 hours.
It's a lot longer than most people think, and especially doing programs, with all 30 major league teams in the parks, and you're dealing with kids that come out to participate in these programs. Most of them think that it's sort of like Little League, right? So you've got a 7 o'clock game. So Joe's showing up the stadium maybe 5 o'clock, getting in a stretch and a workout where you're there all day. And the players are there all day. And the other interesting thing that you had mentioned when you were talking about workload management, which, by the way, we did a whole podcast on that. That'll be part of this series.
Oh, great.
The technology has come a long way just over the past 5, even 10 years that y'all are using on these players to really monitor their workload. When you had mentioned that, I've heard about some of the technology and things that y'all are using, but nothing as far as, using this technology devices or whatever it is on them every day to see how much they're working and when they need rest, or, how to really adjust their weight program based upon the readings of that data.
Yeah, it is. There's so many different pieces coming in, and, as that comes in, we have more staff that come in, and everybody has like a role and responsibility in really disseminating that information, like, cutting it into digestible info and then passing it along to the players. And so there's usually the beginning of a series is like, we'll go over a lot of that stuff, throughout across the board, whether it's strength and conditioning, whether it's medical, doing range of motion or strength measurements, or, the pitching coaches talking about guys, what hitters and what their tendencies are, or same with the, vice versa with the hitting staff on the pitchers. And there's so much information. This guy's, throwing velocity is this, his movement on his pitches is that. And it's, there's a lot of information, and it's definitely driving the game in a good direction, as long as, we can all effectively communicate that information.
Exactly. The game looks so much different than when I used to play. So let's dive into lower body strength training, because I know that's something you wanted to talk about. In fact, when we were setting this series up, we had thrown out a handful of topics, and you were the guy to go to when it comes to lower body strength training. And anybody who's played sports or has been interested in fitness or has been part of that gym world has heard never skip leg day, right? So I want to just talk about first, why are you so passionate about lower strength training?
I think a lot of it for me, honestly, comes from, when I was growing up and playing and really focused on training for my baseball career. It was still in the time where it's like pitchers shouldn't bench, pitchers shouldn't do upper body.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to get tight, you're going to be too big, it's going to affect your ability to pitch. And so I grew up in that era, and saw it, listening to my coaches and things like that, was like, okay, I should probably stay away from the upper body stuff, so wanting to get better and enjoying training, it was big push on leg training. So it was constantly lower body. Obviously, I've learned some things along the way. You can't just do lower body every single day, but and you're a high school kid, so you got to mix in bis and tris as well, because there's a physique component to it for sure.
Yep.
But I think that's why. And I still, to this day, I definitely like my upper body days now that I'm not playing as much, and they're a lot easier. It's a lot easier to will yourself to get under the bar and bench than it is to get under the bar and squat, the older you get. But I still very much enjoy lower body strength training. It is without a doubt my favorite. And I think that's just because it's so unique to me, the different varieties that you can come up with to still challenge your lower body outside of, heavy loading or loading in a certain plane, certain movement. Growing up, it was, squat and deadlift, do some lunges. And, I basically just tried as hard as I could to get my squat number as high as I could and my deadlift number as high as I could. And that was really it. It was like, okay, we'll try again tomorrow to get a higher number. And then the next day, a higher number. So, we've obviously learned stuff along the way, but it's just always stuck with me. I find it fascinating, especially now with the, talking about technology, the accessibility of force plates. And that's actually what I was doing right before this call. Was I had the force plates set up, and I'm doing different jumps, jumping with band, jumping with dumbbells, just looking to see how those force tracings change to kind of profile a different type athlete. So
interesting.
There's a lot to it, and I find it very interesting. So that's I guess that's why.
And growing up like you, I played a bunch of sports, and you kind of realize middle school, high school that, we all come in different shapes and sizes. And I was one of those guys that always had big legs, and that made me self-conscious at times. But, as a baseball player, and as I started to mature, I realized, that was something that was in my favor, just from, being able to push off the rubber and those sorts of things. You go back and you listen to guys like Nolan Ryan talk, and how strength training was super important to him as well. So why would it be beneficial, let's say, for somebody that has no desire to compete, right? You're just talking to just somebody out there that's just trying to stay fit. Is it important for somebody to focus on that lower body strength?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think when I was thinking about this question, really, I think for me, it comes down to your activities of daily living as you age, right? So having a strong lower body, maintaining your lean leg mass for as long as you can as you age, is going to be so incredibly important when it comes to the quality of life you have later on in life. So for me, I kind of take the approach of the stronger your lower body is, the more lean mass you have, the longer it's going to take for that to, deteriorate over age. And, you're going to want to be able to do things like walk up the stairs and go for a walk up a hill, like sit down on the toilet, like any of those things, like, and there's falls are such, I can't tell you the percentages because it's not my, it's not really my population, but falls are an incredibly high thing in older people. And, with bone density decreasing, like there's a lot of risk in those types of activity, in those types of incidents. So for me, I think there's a lot of, the biggest importance is like being able to keep your quality of life up as you age. And I know, like, I have 3 young kids now, and, hopefully I'm around to see their kids and be able to keep up with their kids. And that's, as you age, like that becomes a little bit more of the motivation and the, the focus and intent behind what you're doing is like, I want to be healthy enough and mobile enough to, to still do those things with my kids or my grandkids. And I think that's the important piece right there.
Is there like a key number of how many times a week, let's say just your average person, doing exactly what you're saying, right? Trying to keep that lean muscle mass. How often should they be trying to focus on leg strength, whether it's weights, jumping, plyometrics, or even just walking?
Yeah, for your average, like general population, like no athletic, interests, I would say like 2 to 3 times a week, just, a little bit of something, whether that's some lunging. I mean, you really could just go up and down the stairs a few times just to challenge the system a little bit. But yeah, I think 2 to 3 times a week is enough. The recommendations, I'm not going to try and tell you I remember what they are from, from college classes and stuff like that. But I don't know, it's like 3 times a week of 30 minutes of exercise. Like, I think, if you get 3 total body kind of training sessions in every week for 20 to 30 minutes, that's at least keeping you in a really good spot.
Well, good.
I've become more of a fan of like trying to just going for a walk, just some really low intensity conditioning. I really like to find some hills. And if I can get on a treadmill and crank it up to like a 15 incline,
man,
find that's like, it's very challenging for something as simple as walking. You're right. Walking in place. You're not going anywhere. You're on a treadmill, but it's hard. It's hard.
It
so, I think that even just like some simple walking, things that are going to get you make you slightly uncomfortable, like is challenging your system a little bit more. So, that's an easy way to start.
I feel a lot better about myself. We have 2 kids under the age of 2. And their bedrooms are upstairs. So one of them doesn't even walk, and the other one tries to climb up the stairs. So we're going up those stairs all day, every day. So I guess I shouldn't feel so bad if I'm not getting legs at the gym twice a week.
No, if you're carrying them up and down the stairs, yeah, you're doing good.
So in your role, let's shift back to professional baseball players, right? So you're evaluating these guys on a day-to-day basis. And what are you looking for when you're working with these guys that tells you, hey, we probably need to sit down and have a discussion that maybe you need to lay off the bench press and upper body stuff, and we really need to start focusing on lower body strength?
It's a very, like we said earlier, there's so many pieces of technology and so many different avenues to give players information. We have a pretty robust system of screening and monitoring, testing protocols that we do relatively frequently, most every 2 weeks, some once a month. But we have these profiles that we create for guys. So it gives them their historical data over the course of the past year, and then it has a comparison relative to everybody in our organization. And those are really what drive our conversations, right? So everybody's getting their strength and conditioning program. These results kind of drive the direction of our strength and conditioning program. And we're taking that information that we're getting in testing, and we're starting to have those conversations with guys. Hey, like, you're good in this area. We need to focus more in this area. Like, your strength numbers relative to everybody else in the org probably aren't the best. Like, we need or aren't the best, we probably need to shift our focus in this direction a little bit more. Your upper body strength is in a good spot. Your shoulder strength is in a good spot, whatever it may be. So we do a lot of those. We have a lot of those conversations really frequently these days. So that really is the big driver of our conversations, is that testing data. But it also comes down to just checking in with the guys every day. Just a brief, like it could be 20 seconds of a conversation. Hey, how you feeling today? Shoulder's a little tight. All right, let's check that out. Come back in a little bit later. Hey, let's check it out right now. Or hey, why don't you run down and see the athletic trainer really quick? Those conversations are as small or as short as they may be are crucial for the long term in keeping guys, keeping communication with guys, because the guys that are like, oh yeah, everything's good. Next day, everything's good. Next day, everything's good. And then one day you're like, how you feeling? They're like, and you're like, okay, something's wrong with you. Like, let's dig in a little bit deeper. So I think it really all just comes down to observing what their trends are throughout the season, but having those communications as well.
Okay, so you learn that, okay, we probably need to focus a little bit more on lower body strength.
Yeah.
I'm trying to figure out the best way to ask you the question. I mean, is it across the board as far as, okay, do we go into the weight room and hit squats, or do we hit the leg sled, or is it something where we need to do plyometric training like you had talked about the ladders, or is it something as simple as a jog or a run or sprints? How would you determine, and kind of what's the next steps for a guy that needs that extra strength in their lower body?
Yeah. So like I said, our force plate, we use force plates a lot to do, jumping tests with them. We're able to measure their force output, what their power looks like, explosiveness. And those are the metrics that really kind of drive that decision making. So, if we have a guy who's really good at, loading in his jump, we'll say, and every org has their own little combination of the metrics that they find valuable. Some of them overlap, some of them don't, and everybody has different reasons for selecting the metrics that they select. But if somebody's really good at loading into the ground, but they don't push up really well, that kind of drives a certain type program. If you're not very explosive, we need to work on the explosiveness piece. So we need to be able to train, you to be faster coming out, right? And do that at a faster rate. If somebody struggles to, if they're trying to think of some examples here, if somebody struggles loading, like pushing up, they load down really well, but they struggle to push up. We need to find certain exercises that are going to emphasize that. So it really kind of bases around the force velocity profile, the speed strength continuum, where guys fall. And there are so many metrics that kind of dictate that. So, a guy might be really good at the explosiveness piece, but this is down, but this is up. That kind of alters the way that program will go, or maybe the emphasis of that program. But you also, the hard thing during the season is you also have to be cognizant of the training schedule or the playing schedule, where you're going to be training, what equipment you may or may not have access to. So it's certainly an art. I was just writing some programs for our starting pitchers last night, and I'm looking and I'm like, okay, the next time he does lower body, we're going to be at home, but the time after that, we're going to be on the road.
Interesting. So okay.
I need to kind of load some exercises into this week that normally I would put in the second week, but because I know we're not going to have access to them, I might need to switch that focus around. Say he needs to load heavy this week, and he's gonna do more dynamic, more jumping or loaded jumping the second week, because that's what we're gonna have easier access to.
So it's not just, and that's why I figured it was going to be hard to word that question, because it's not really black or white. Hey, so-and-so, Don, you need to go and, load up weights on the sled machine and get in as many reps as you can. I guess it's not as simple as that. It's taking all the data that you have in their current programs on a day-to-day basis, putting them all together, and then figuring out what works. Especially, again, you don't even think like, hey, if I'm on the road, they might not have XYZ equipment, which is really interesting. That I've never thought about that before.
Yeah, it's you have your ideals and then you have the realities.
Mm-hmm.
So, and we're, in addition to that, trying to fluctuate, like not only just what they need, like as an individual, but also like what makes sense for them, not in the current moment, but for the duration of the season, that whole season. If we push too hard right now while he's feeling good, like as his innings start to rack up, maybe he gets a little bit over, he's gotten a little bit too much. He's overloaded a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And now he's really fatigued. Like we pushed him a little too hard early on.
Mm-hmm.
And now that those innings have accumulated, he is fried, and we need to revamp that approach. So, you always kind of battle the performance, on-field performance with like the weight room performance, that development versus performance kind of conundrum, where it's like, well, developmentally we need to get here, but performance wise, like we want him to be performing on the field. That ultimately is the most important thing. But for the long term, like for his career long term, we need to kind of push him to get to this point.
Yeah.
So it's a very delicate balance. Very
fine line, it seems like.
I feel like if somebody tells you they haven't figured out, they're lying to you. Because there's so many factors that go into it. And I think going back to what I was saying earlier, I really think like that's what's so fascinating to me about the lower body strength training. I mean, you could say the same thing about the upper body, but like, the lower body is what's driving a lot of this stuff. And, when it comes to power output and explosiveness and, all those qualities. So, there's so many different things, so many different metrics, and I'm really scratching the surface with that in terms of like looking at how these jump numbers play with their strength numbers and play with, their isometric numbers. And so there's so many different tests out there, and there's so many metrics you can use. It's, I kind of tie myself up sometimes going, oh, well, maybe this is the metric we should look at instead. And then you're just constantly bouncing around. And
I think what you're doing too is you're providing perspective to the average person listening that is not involved in professional sports. And just when you get to that level, every little bit matters. So there is that fine line that you're walking on a day-to-day basis that, players have access to you to try to help them to get to the next level, right, in their career. And I think that gives such a great perspective just from somebody on the outside looking in, like, wow, I mean, every little day, every hour, every, muscle tightness, everything counts.
Yeah. And I think that's where the game's going in general, is just you have so much more information like available through different technologies, and it's how can you get the competitive advantage? What little detail or little secret can you hold on to that's gonna keep you ahead of everybody else? And everything.
Yeah, and one of the things you've mentioned often is the force plate. So for those of people that are listening that don't know what that is, what I'll do is I'll put a link in the show notes, maybe off to like a YouTube video of what it is and what it looks like and how it's used, so that, people get a better understanding. But I've been anxious to ask you this question, because let's go back to the average person. And I'm in the gym 4 to 5 days a week. I mix it up, cardio, weights. I don't do any heavy lifting or anything like that. But what I notice is there's two different sort of mindsets with those people that are in my gym. And I've been to a couple in the area, and when I travel, I try to work out. But the mindset is okay, you see some people that are on just your machines, right? Your leg extensions, whatever. But then you'll have the people that are, whether they're on the Smith machine or just the free weight, doing squats in the squat rack. Are there benefits to both? Is one better than the other? Sort of, what is the thought process behind that?
Yeah. So typically your machine based training is going to isolate like one specific joint and more of a muscle group.
Okay.
Whereas your, free weight training is going to be more multi-joint, for the most part, more multi-joint. There's going to be more stability requirements because, the machine isn't doing the stability for you. You have to do that. So there's a time and a place for both. Right.
Okay.
And I think it really depends on what the goals are. I don't think there's really any bad exercises, just potentially bad options for the wrong people. But there's a time and a place for both. I use both when we go on the road and I don't have as much access to weight room facilities. I'm usually at like a Planet Fitness, and I know that the weeks that I'm there, I'm going to spend a little bit more time hitting some machines. I'll still do free weights, but I have an opportunity to use machines as well. So, it depends on where you're at, really. If somebody can't squat because they don't have the mobility requirements or the stability requirements to do that safely, then the leg press is a perfect, a perfect opportunity, a perfect machine for them. There's still some adjustments that might need to be made, but in terms of how far they go, depth wise, depending on their hip mobility or back issues or whatever it may be, knee issues. But again, like you can use free weights from a more functional perspective to gain some stability requirements, and you can use the machines to just really isolate things. So it's you can use really all of them. Okay, I don't want to go down too deep of a rabbit hole.
And I think you did a great job of sort of explaining that, because you always see the same people on the free weights and you always see the same people on the machines. And I like to kind of use both, depending, just to kind of mix things up so the workout's not boring. So I want to shift gears into more of a focus. Like, this would be our primary age group, right? So we talk to adult influencers, coaches, parents, all the way to young people. And for that young person that's listening, or maybe it's a parent or a coach, what are some basic things they can be focused on to improve their lower body strength?
Yeah, I think the big ones for me are squatting, lunging patterns.
Okay.
Squatting, lunging patterns, and really your core training, like pelvic stability, is going to be incredibly important when it comes to your lower body training, because, that's going to play a huge role. Having your pelvis, understand when your pelvis is, going through space and rotating a little bit, like there needs to be some sort of stability requirement there when your foot hits the ground, or else we're going to start to have typically some back problems and or hip problems with that, usually like lower back problems. So those are the big patterns for me. I think, especially for people at home that or younger athletes that, you need something to do at home, doing some body weight squatting, lunging, body weight lunges in multiple planes, forwards, sideways, reverse, like diagonal lunging, just to keep you, like, to train your lower body and your pelvis how to be in different positions, right? To work in multiple planes of movement. I mean, typically your standard person's really just going to walk or run forward, but providing that movement variability is going to be important.
So let's talk to the person that doesn't have access to a weight facility, a gym. And I know I've been in multiple minor league and major league facilities. You guys have incredible equipment, but there's a lot of us out there that wouldn't have access to that. What are some of just the basic movements or exercises they could do at home? Let's say in their family room or their garage, or maybe in their front lawn.
Yeah, I think so. This is a fun one for me because, and I think there has been a better understanding of how to utilize, we'll say, non-traditional implements for training from COVID. So a lot of people, a lot of gyms and, a lot of things got closed down. A lot of people started figuring out ways to train at home using non-traditional implements and things like that. I know we had to do that same thing. Look, guys, we can't go to the gym, but like here's our program. It's body weight. Like go find a tree limb, do some chin-ups. Like we had guys building squat racks out of 4x4s and cement cement buckets, and they would notch out a spot for the bar, and truly incredible stuff. And I think you saw a lot of those videos while COVID was going on. So I really like that. And I, formerly a gym owner as well. Like I like to find the cheap way to go about, because strength, exercise equipment's not cheap by any means.
You're right.
There's certainly ways that you can go about having a little setup at home for relatively inexpensive. And I do the same thing at my own. Yes, I have a nice squat rack, but I like building things so that I can use as weight equipment and finding a cheaper way to do it. So yeah, anyways, at home, really, like you can utilize anything, especially body weight wise, holding weights, shoulder work with soup cans. You can use your couch or one of your chairs from your dining room table to do hook hip lifting, glute bridges, hamstring work, body weight lunging, using your stairs, going up and down your stairs, like we said earlier. The big ones for me, body weight squatting. When you feel good with squatting in place in your living room, you can do isometrics where you hold. It's going to challenge the system a little bit differently. Then you grab something.
Yeah, those aren't fun.
No, definitely not. There's a lot of value to it with good posture. For me, like when I was a new father, I got, being the strength coach, I got from I don't know if it was from my wife or my mom or my mother-in-law, but a book called Baby Barbell. And it was like a whole book of exercises that you can use your child for.
Nice.
So it'd be like skull crushers with your kid, and you're just like, you kiss them on the forehead, you do like a tricep extension, skull crusher overhead, like any of that stuff. I mean, you can hold a kid. If you're a new parent, you can do squats with your, holding your kid. You can do, we used to put our kids in like a front pack and do chin-ups with them. You got to be careful that you don't knock their head on the bar, but there's so many different things you can use, like a backpack. You fill a backpack up with, some plates or cans of soup. There's so many different, a bag of sand, like a backpack and a bag of sand from Home Depot. Like, and you can divide it up into, 10 pounds, 20 pounds, 30 pounds. You can get the bag of sand itself and hold that in your hands and goblet squat or lunge, or, push-ups with the sand on your back, push-ups with a band. I think there's so many, I really enjoy trying to figure out different ways to challenge the system with non-traditional implements. But I think if you have a pack of like your standard kind of super bands, the longer, skinnier ones with some resistance, and then a pack of mini bands and a foam roller, like I really feel like you can do a fair amount of stuff. Tying a band, tie the band to the beam in the basement, the support beam in the basement. You can do rowing with the band, pressing with the band. You can step on the band and pull it over your shoulders. So it's like kind of behind your neck, and you can do like band squats. You can do band walks that way. You can put the band on the floor, hold on each side, step on it, and do like band loaded split squats. Yeah, there's so many different options like for that. You just got to get creative with it.
Yeah, you have definitely thought this one through. These are some super creative ideas. I love the whole book about, using your baby as a way to get in some exercise. I might have to try that here this afternoon.
Yeah, it's, that was, I think for me and our first kids, we had twins. So we kind of got like a double dose of parenting right away. But, it's hard. You go through a time where things, if you're a gym goer, like you go through this time where you're like, okay, it's not really feasible for me to get my workout in right now, just because, the kids finally got a nap and you can't take them, you can't take them to the gym, or they didn't sleep last night and you're just exhausted. And what tends to go, usually it's kind of like your personal, like, physical health time. And you can find, I really got passionate about that as well, finding ways to still get your workout in without like leaving the house, or having to separate yourself from the kids. And that was, I think, fortunately for our family, they were about 2 during COVID, and we couldn't go anywhere, and I had gym equipment, and we set it up, and it was like a family thing that we did in the morning. Like, I would get up before everybody, I would get most of my workout done, and then everybody else would be getting up as I was finishing up, and they would all come down, and the kids would be grabbing like the 2-pound dumbbells and doing shoulder press, and I would put them on my chest and they would bench press, and I would support the bar for them. And so we've kind of created this little like habit of exercise is a good thing, and there's ways to do it. And I'm up here in Maine, my wife and kids are at home in Massachusetts, and she sends me videos while she's riding the Peloton, and our daughter's like jumping off of an RX pad, a 2-inch RX pad, and jumping and being like, yay, and then getting back up and doing it again. And that's really, for me, all I can hope for. But it has created some different ways to look at exercise in general.
Yeah, it applies to me because, that's kind of the chapter of life that I'm in, if you will, where our kids are younger. I, used to going to the gym 5 to 6 days a week, where you got a kid, that's in daycare now and they're 6. So it's harder to do that. So it's, do I get in for a walk? Do I go for a jog? Just trying to do something every day to stay active. Now, what I want to try and do is kind of tie back, our primary topic. And I know you're familiar with the Taylor Hooton Foundation, the work that we do. But, talking about the use of performance enhancing drugs, because as athletes, and even as those of us who aren't competitive in sports, that, we're still trying to work out, and we want to change physical appearance, and we want to be the best person we could possibly be. For anybody out there that's listening, at some point, they might be tempted to use performance enhancing drugs, or, obviously this might be a consideration for them. What would be your message to them as somebody that has made it really to the pinnacle of your sport, and you are currently working with professional athletes on a day-to-day basis? Talk to that for a minute.
I guess the big thing I would say is like, the risk is not worth the reward in this game. Like, there's been athletes that have used steroids and had success, but I think you get to see, like, you see those, and they might have a little blemish on their on their careers. You see those people, but you don't see all the ones who didn't make it or have health issues. And it's I can certainly see the pressures. Like, I get it. There's so much at stake when it comes to your professional career, as an athlete, and, going to college and going into professional sports is, a goal of so many people's. But, getting there through the use of anabolic steroids really isn't, like, it's not a guarantee, and the risks of the risks of the health risks far outweigh, like, the benefits of getting there. And there's so many things. I get, like, the supplements in general are such a popular thing. You need to know what you're putting in your body, and it takes some maturity to understand that, like, when we're 15, 16, 17, 18 years old, like, we're invincible, right? But
you're right.
You don't realize that down the line, down the road, when you're older, you could be paying for that, through, organ function might start to suffer, and, You know, you pay for it at a time when you have more than just you. So usually those things start to come about and, you know, rear their ugly heads from your past, like as you're in your 30s, right? You're settling down, having a family, like your athletic career is over and you've moved on to something else, and then bang, you're hit with all these things from a silly mistake and, you know, a risk that you took 10 years ago. You know, I'll say for me, you know, I've never used any sort of steroids, performance enhancers. I certainly was somebody that wanted to do as good as I possibly could in my athletic career. And, you know, I certainly used a lot of supplements, some of which back then probably were not good for my health.
Yeah.
And, you know, I last year had a cancer diagnosis in my kidney, and, you know, thankfully I had surgery, everything was removed, and, you know, we're all good and healthy now. But, you know, I sat back during that time and thought, like, I wonder if it had anything to do with something that I took or take from a supplement perspective, that like I didn't know certain ingredients and it caused some sort of abnormal cell growth. And, you know, you don't know what it is, but the thing is, like, you rarely pay for it in that moment, you know.
Yeah.
You probably pay for it a little bit later on in life. And, you know, I can't imagine like not being here, having, you know, 3 kids under 5 years old. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And that perspective you're providing is wisdom. Right. And you know, kind of growing up, I tell my dad today, it's like, I wish I would have listened to you more. You know, I always thought I knew more than you, and we're all guilty of that. But, you know, like my dad told me, you live and you learn, right? You have to kind of fail in order to understand, you know, what success is like and those sorts of things. And it's really hard, I know, being in high school or even college, or even for some of these young pro athletes, to really have perspective on life in general, you know, anything outside of the game and health risks obviously associated with these performance enhancing drugs. Joe, this has been outstanding. I actually have 2 other questions for you that I want to ask, that we've asked every strength coach that we've done this podcast with so far in the series. So it'll be interesting as people are listening to the series every couple of weeks as it comes out, to hear what each strength coach has to say. So the first question I have for you, out of all the baseball stadiums that you've had a chance to visit, which one is your favorite?
Major league, minor league, or does it not matter?
How about both? Let's do both.
Okay. Well, I'll say from a minor league perspective, we'll start there first. Out of all the ones I've been able to go to and be on the field, I really think I spent 2021 in Greenville, South Carolina, which is now our high A affiliate. Mm-hmm. The park and the atmosphere there is like, it's about as pure as you can get from a minor league baseball perspective. It's a great field. It's a great setup overall. Since I've been there, they've actually like made it nicer. You know, it's dimensions of Fenway Park. It has a monster with seats on it. It has a big like building behind it with a rooftop bar that you can look down, like that's, you know, twice as high as the monster. It's everything about it is like really beautiful. You know, the way the stadium set up is, even when there's not a huge crowd, like it still feels like you're in that atmosphere. So that's probably my minor league field right there. I think the Hartford Yard Goats is pretty similar as well. We're actually heading there next week, but that one has a really good atmosphere, a really nice stadium, nice playing surface, and you know, good clubhouse. Mm-hmm. When it comes to major league fields, I've been to a few stadiums overall. You know, I've been to Yankee Stadium as a fan. I've been to Fenway, obviously, as a fan. Baltimore, Montreal, actually, when I was a kid. Went up to Montreal. But fortunately, last year I had the opportunity to spend some time with the big league club. So my first was at Fenway. my first experience on the field at Fenway. And so that's kind of like a childhood dream, right? Obviously you want to be, playing in the game, but there's not many second bests like that are as close to your first as that was. And
exactly.
So it's so unique, historical, like in being from the area and growing up a Red Sox fan, that certainly, has its place. And like I said, I haven't been to many, but I did spend a series with the big league club at Yankee Stadium, and
it's a nice
that was just like a whole another level. Like huge bowl, like it's a coliseum.
Mm-hmm.
And it was while we were there, it was actually while Judge was set to break the home run record. And every time he got up to the plate, like the place went silent. And like it gives you goosebumps just as a baseball fan. It was like truly an incredible thing. And I remember like just walking out on the field, and it's so different because there's so many people, and and they hate you, so they're yelling at you. But you're at the same time, you're like, wow, this is really like, this is it. So it's cool. Those were really the only two places I've been. They both have, they're both going to have a special place in my heart. Hopefully I get to some more. Both favorites for different reasons.
Those are two polar opposite stadiums. And have,
absolutely.
We've been working with baseball for, nearly 20 years. And I've had the, every really standing stadium today, other than the Braves' new stadium, I've had an opportunity to go to. In Fenway, we were, there, we do a lot of work in Rhode Island, and we were recognizing Chris Sale, who is one of our MLB All-Me Advisory Board members. So we got to go to a game. And, it's hard to compare Fenway and Wrigley to some of today's modern stadiums.
Yeah.
But one thing I will never forget about Fenway, I don't care if you love or hate the Red Sox, when you walk out of that stadium after a game, you will be a Red Sox fan. From the fans to the atmosphere, like it feels like you're close to the players, you're close to the action, and just everybody is into the game. It's hard to explain. Versus going to a big part, like one of the new facilities, like a Rangers and the Yankees, and not like the fans aren't in the game. It's so hard to explain that fan experience.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. And it is like, I remember interviewing for like when I got hired with the Red Sox, I remember interviewing with a couple guys, and they were like, oh, what is, you're from here, what's your greatest memory? And I'm like, I remember the first time I went to Fenway Park, because like you just can't, I don't know, it's this like image I'll always have in my head of like just walking up the ramp right behind home plate, and like you just see the net, and then you see the field, you see the monster in the background, and there's just this atmosphere about it. And certainly like, Fenway's unique. It's not like, it doesn't fit in with today's parks by any means, but there's such a special atmosphere there that like, it is just different. It is totally different.
No, you're right. So my last question for you, and this is going to be very unique with your background, is you said you were a gym owner. You have a home gym. You go to work, and you have a facility there where you train, professional athletes. So if you were starting your own home gym, let's say you didn't have one, okay, and you could only purchase one piece of equipment to use, what would be that one piece of equipment that you'd have to have?
Yeah, if you're gonna go in on the home gym, I could go two ways with this. My lifting side of me says like, I want the squat rack, because I can cover my major movements in there.
Okay.
I can use the rack to tie bands again, so I can do rowing, and like it provides like a wide array of strength and conditioning options. So one side of me says that. The other side of me says a Peloton.
Okay. Interesting.
And those are two different perspectives. That's maybe like a pre-parent Joe versus a post-parent Joe. But the Peloton, like from a workout perspective, a conditioning perspective, like in 30 minutes on the Peloton while my kids are taking a nap, I don't leave the house. I get a great session in, and I do something that I don't really like to do all that much, which is like cardiovascular activity. So I think for me, it's like, those are my two suggestions. Like if you find yourself in a spot where you need a quick workout, but like you can't afford to leave the house kind of thing. Cause I would just go run outside. I don't really have a problem running, but when I'm home in the off season, it's the middle of winter. I'm not going for a run when it's, 18 degrees outside.
You're right.
So while my kids are napping, like I'm in the house, I have the monitor like right near the bike, and I get a good 30-minute, 45-minute session in, and still have time to do the laundry or prep dinner or do the dishes, whatever it is. And, I like, that was one of the big things we decided to purchase when we had kids, was like, let's get something that we can, get a good quick session in. But on the other side, like I wouldn't trade my rack for anything.
Well, you will have to
having that.
Yeah, you will have to tune into this PBS series to hear what your peers have to say as well. Because everybody had like, well, I have one, but I also have another one. So it'll be interesting once we wrap this series up, and it'll start airing here soon. But to see what everybody has to say, so you have to be able to tune in for that. Well, Joe, we've taken a lot of your time. I know it's your time is very valuable and important, and we just appreciate all of the knowledge that you've shared with us today, and just a big thank you on behalf of the Taylor Hooton Foundation to your organization, the Professional Baseball Strength and Conditioning Coaches Society, for all of your support.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you having me on. I had a lot of fun.
Well, that's it for today's show. Thanks for listening to the All Me podcast from the Taylor Hooton Foundation, a nonprofit organization leading a national campaign to enlighten people to the truths about appearance and performance-enhancing substances, and inspiring people to live and compete without the use of these substances. Please be sure to subscribe to our podcast and tune in to our next episode.